Kyrie Irving might be the most gifted ball handler that the NBA has ever seen. He's expanded on the foundation that was laid by players like Pistol Pete Maravich, Isaiah Thomas, and eventually Allen Iverson. Unfortunately though, over the past couple years, despite his unbelievable skills, there's been a number of seasons where for one reason or another, we haven't seen Kyrie on the court for any longer than 60 games since leaving Boston all the way back in 2019. Closing at the end of this current season, and we've seen Kyrie and Luka's Mavs light it up as they look to clinch their playoff standing, winning 9 of their last 10 games as the making of this video. And despite the insane amount of talent in the West, the Mavericks should definitely not be a team that gets overlooked, as Kyrie looks locked in on winning his first ring outside the shadow of LeBron all the way back in 2016. So after starting his career in Cleveland, then going on to win his first ring only 5 years into his career, I think it's worth looking back on the path that took Kyrie from that to ending up landing on 3 different franchises, playing with a total of 6 future Hall of Famers, and not having anything more than a second round exit to show for it. Kyrie, since day one, has always held the nation in awe with the sheer talent and creativity that he's displayed since his days in high school. By the time that his high school years were up, Kyrie left St. Patrick as one of the top-rated prospects in the entire nation. He ended up taking his talents to Duke after being impressed by Coach K during their recruitment. Unfortunately though, Kyrie suffered an injury that resulted in him playing only 8 games for the team, but he was able to make a return for the NCAA tournament, dropping 28 in the Sweet 16 round. Still finding a way to make enough of an impact that by the time that the 2011 NBA draft came along, he was still considered a consensus first overall pick. Cleveland wisely drafted Kyrie, and he made an instant impact on their rebuilding franchise. Immediately in his first season, Kyrie was already leading this team in both scoring and assists while averaging the second most amount of steals as well. Of course though, this 2011-2012 Cavs team was pretty bad, as the next highest scoring player behind Kyrie was Antoine Jamison, averaging 17 points on 40% shooting from the field. So yeah, not great. The Cavs finished out that shortened lockout season with a 21-45 record, but individually, Kyrie ended up taking home that season's Rookie of the Year award. Going into his sophomore season, little changed within the franchise, except for an aging Antoine leaving for his final seasons in LA, and fellow sophomore Tristan Thompson taking a small second-year leap. As for Kyrie, he continued his progression, actually increasing his scoring and assist averages from 18-5 to 22-6, with more of a responsibility on him as this team's clear first option. His shooting efficiency did slip a little, but being a second-year player with the team's main offensive responsibility, that's to be expected. Kyrie's performance that season was extremely impressive, so much so that he was named an All-Star for that year, a rare feat for a second-year pro. Cleveland made some changes to the team in the following year, but by the end of that season, there was clear rumblings that hometown hero LeBron James was looking to make his way back to Cleveland, now that they had done the work making the team. LeBron coming back to Cleveland had completely shifted the look and expectations of this team. Now Kyrie, who was the young top dog, was going to have to learn to play beside LeBron. Unsurprisingly, the fit was seamless though. Although Kyrie was now taking less shot attempts, more of those shots were going in. And with LeBron being the best driver of the basketball probably ever, meant that Kyrie was often left open on the perimeter. So coming off a year where he posted his worst ever 3-point percentage to date, he actually went on to post his career best just one season later. This was the LeBron James effect. The Cavs were a serious problem in an underwhelming Eastern Conference. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about the legendary battles that the Warriors and Cavs had for 4 straight seasons, but 2016 definitely deserves a little look back on. Everyone knows that without Kyrie's insane performance of averaging 27, 4, and 4 on the series, including a legendary 41-point night alongside LeBron in Game 5, well, also getting the game-winning bucket in Game 7, the Cavs probably wouldn't have won that year's championship. But I think it's even more impressive when you look at his regular season that year and how pretty awful it was, and how he was able to rally back and show up for his team in the most important part of the season. After winning the championship in 2016, Kyrie came back the following season looking like a man on a mission. But the thing that many of us didn't know at the time was, that mission was actually, how do I get out of Cleveland and as far away from LeBron James as possible? That July, Kyrie requested a trade from the Cavaliers, shocking the entire NBA world. However, Kyrie didn't really get that far away from LeBron. He ended up in Boston with the new-look Celtics. Maybe it looks a little further away when you live on a flat earth? I don't know, we'll leave that question to Kyrie. At the time, the Boston Celtics were thriving with Isaiah Thomas quickly becoming one of the league's top stars, averaging 29 and 6 while leading that 2017 Celtics team to a first seed in the East before eventually failing to Kyrie and the Cavs, coincidentally. The Celtics knew that during that year, they had essentially ruined IT, and so it was easy for them to make the move to send him to Cleveland in exchange for Kyrie. This gave the young core that the Celtics were establishing one of the league's top point guards to help develop their games, but one that they didn't just cause permanent damage on, delegating him to a life of tweeting out #slowgrind whenever a role player gets injured. Karma did end up coming back for the Celtics because unfortunately for Kyrie, right before the playoffs he would suffer an injury that would ultimately require surgery, putting him on the sidelines while the team he was supposed to be leading was dominating through the East without him, eventually taking his now former Cavs team to a 7-game series in the conference finals. The following season, Kyrie would return and somewhat struggle. The team fizzled out in the second round of that year's playoffs, and in the following offseason, Kyrie was headed for free agency. But the Celtics really weren't too worried because he had told everyone that he intended to stay for as long as they would have him. So the front office really had no worries. I mean, why would he lie like that? He wouldn't lie like that, right, Kyrie? Oh, and he's already in Brooklyn. So heading into free agency after expressing his desire to stay with the franchise, there was actually some reports about the lack of chemistry and maybe even more friction inside the Celtics locker room that started with Kyrie. However, in hindsight, you can see the reverence in which players like Tatum and Jaylen Brown talk about Kyrie, and the same way in return. While on the flip side, there's a pretty famous video of Kyrie stomping on the Celtics logo. So I would bet if there was any friction that Kyrie had in Boston, it began and ended in the front office, and not any of his former teammates, as some of the reports would suggest. Either way, it did appear that there was little interest on either side for Kyrie to return, and it seemed like the meaning behind a video captured at that year's All-Star game between Kyrie and KD talking about 2 open roster spots on some unknown team was becoming a lot more clear.
Despite telling season ticket holders that he intended to sign long-term with the Celtics, Kyrie Irving was out the door less than a year later. This shocked many Celtics fans considering it seemed like the Kyrie-era Celtics never really got a proper shot. Regardless, the popular rumors floating around at the time that KD and Kyrie were going to team up on Brooklyn turned out to be true. By the end of Kyrie Irving's Boston tenure, he had already gained a bit of a reputation as an unreliable teammate and person. He did this with stunts like not even attending Game 7 against his former team, the Cavs, for minor surgery on a deviated septum. Now that he was finally teaming up with Kevin Durant on the Nets, however, it would only be natural that he try to be on his best behavior for his new team. Everybody, including Kyrie himself, knew that this team had some serious potential and were probably going to be the favorites if KD came back healthy from his injury to join the squad. Before that could happen though, Kyrie had to hold it down for the team solo for an entire year. Sadly, Kyrie had to miss most of this year due to a right shoulder injury, and after coming back for 20 games was sidelined yet again after deciding to get the shoulder operated on. Nobody really cared about this though, as KD was still injured and most people agreed it might be a good idea to have both of those guys healthy come next season. Going into the next season, KD eventually came back and looked like he hadn't missed a beat. He and Kyrie had a hot start to the season, all things considered, with the injuries. This is where Kyrie had his first sketchy moment though. Kyrie went missing on his team during a game day to attend a birthday party for his sister. He didn't tell a single person he was doing it, and worst of all, was found to have broken newly created COVID protocols. Kyrie was forced to miss a number of games while quarantining. Worst of all, he lost about $1 million in fines and docked pay for the games he missed. This was a minor hiccup, all things considered, yet was enough to make the Nets double down and put them in a real winning position come playoff time. In January of that same season, a few days after Kyrie broke protocol, the Nets traded for James Harden. If this team wasn't already the favorites in the minds of everyone, you can bet they were now. Things really couldn't have looked better for a few months. Kyrie was back in a flash, and 3 of the league's best isolation scorers all put together on one team were really offensively unstoppable. Just get one of the 3 a good mismatch and let him cook. The trouble started when both Kyrie and Harden sustained minor injuries right in time for the 21 playoffs. They really had a good run in the playoffs even when injured, taking eventual champs Giannis's Bucks to a Game 7, and getting really unlucky with KD's foot on the line shot. At this point, if Kyrie kept on track and stayed focused, we could have seen a completely different Kyrie for a few years. We might have even seen the Nets win a chip with that big 3, but Kyrie and the world had other plans. COVID was becoming more and more of a problem. Cities and states across the country were implementing vaccine laws for working. Despite being rich and famous, NBA players were not really spared from these rules. New York City, where Brooklyn is located, was one of the first cities to implement these laws. Kyrie didn't really care though, and wasn't exactly feeling the whole vaccination thing going into the season. This created a huge problem for the Nets. Kyrie couldn't play home games. This ruled out at least half of the total games of the season. And that's not even counting the other cities which wouldn't allow unvaccinated players to play as well. To give Kyrie credit, it is pretty stupid that he was allowed to travel with the team and sit courtside but not play. On the flip side, it's also pretty stupid for Kyrie to completely ruin team chemistry by refusing to get vaccinated, unlike his other 2 co-stars, because he stayed up late watching too much Alex Jones for a few nights. Kyrie hoped to return to the team full time, and it was looking somewhat promising for him, but the damage was already done for Harden, who no doubt considered him a clown for squandering their shot at a ring together to try to be some online freedom fighter. Harden ended up requesting a trade around the deadline, and got replaced with Ben Simmons. It was truly over for the Nets at that point. Obviously, they didn't do much in the playoffs, as you guessed. Somehow KD didn't force his way out yet, but that would soon change due to an even more idiotic move from Irving. Early into the next season, Kyrie shares a link to an anti-Semitic movie on Twitter and gets suspended indefinitely. Keep in mind, he does this in Brooklyn, a place that has the most Jewish people in the entire USA. And boom, KD was requesting a trade soon after that. He stuck with Kyrie through a lot, but just couldn't take it anymore. The Nets ended up dealing both players basically at the same time and committing to a full rebuild. The Nets' Big 3 era came to an end faster than it started, and the majority of it can be blamed on Kyrie. Luckily for Kyrie, he got dealt to the Mavs in the heart of Texas, a place where you can be as openly racist as you want. Jokes aside, despite struggling to get wins early in his Mavs tenure, Kyrie really hasn't had that controversial of a time in Dallas. He seems content with being Luka's number 2 at this point, and I'm sure a mentor in some aspects of NBA life. Recently, due to some good-fitting trades, the Mavs are looking to be a real threat in this year's playoffs, so maybe watch out for a Kyrie Irving redemption arc coming soon. Let's face it, Kyrie Irving is the black sheep of the NBA at this point. He's legitimately one of the most talented players the league has to offer, yet has dived headfirst into controversy at almost every step of his career. Can Kyrie turn his image and career around to that all-time level everyone knows he's capable of? Who knows, but it's been a blast to keep up with all of his antics over the past years. Now that he's seemingly locked in again, do him and Luka have what it takes to win a chip this year or in the future? Let us know in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching if you made it this far. Consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next week.